Cool, thank you. So hello everyone and welcome to the session 5 of Android Study Jam by GDSC IIIT Hyderabad. And today we will learn more about fragments and navigation using navigation graphs. So in the last session I left in this app, this was the Words app, and we did navigation using intents between activities. Okay, so just to tell you again what exactly is fragment. So fragment is basically a smaller component of the full page. Maybe you can say it as a collection of UI components, and you can put more than one fragments in a single activity. And just like activity you have like on create, on delete, all that stuff, we have similar functions for fragment also. So fragment is very similar to activity, just the difference is that a fragment is inside an activity, and on a single screen there can be a single activity but more than one fragments. So in this case, like you can see on the tab, we choose to show both fragments like this. On the smaller screen, we choose to show the fragments like this, but the activity is same. Okay, so I mean the activity main, the activity details, these are all activities, and in this session we will create fragments, and we will also look at how to navigate between fragments and also use the navigation graph, which is like the main feature of Android Studio. So first of all, since we are playing here with fragments, we will have to create fragments, but make sure that you already have this code. This is the same code from the last session. We built a Words app. If you don't have this code or don't know what we did, I will request you to please make sure to watch the session 4 first and then come to watch this, because this will be highly dependent on what we did in the last session. Cool. So for creating the session, for creating the fragment, let's directly go to file, new, and we have a bunch of things. We will go to fragment. In previous sessions we chose activity, in this session we are going to create fragment. Now we have a couple of options here, but in this session we will choose fragment blank only. The blank will be still a lot, but let's go with this. So fragment name, we will create two fragments. First will be for the first screen, which contains the list of letters. So let's say it is letter list fragment. The layout name is simple. Source, make sure it is Kotlin. We are focusing on Kotlin this whole series of sessions. Don't choose Java. And then finish. Just a side note while this is generating, as I said in the last session also, this is very similar to the exact course thing, so that you don't face much difficulty while going through all this stuff. Okay, so make sure you complete those also and earn all the badges required. Okay, cool. So we created this letter list fragment. We chose blank, but as you can see, it is not as much blank as you want. Okay, for now let's create another fragment for the list of words starting with that particular letter. So new, again fragment, again blank fragment. This time the name should be word list fragment. Fragment layout name will be automatically filled as fragment word list. This is fine, and click finish. Just wait a couple. Okay, cool. Now when it's done, you will see Gradle project sync in progress. It will take some time, but in the meantime let's do a little cleanup, because as I said, we will be focusing on the fragment from blank, so we don't need all this stuff also. So we will remove this much at least. We will remove this also. We will remove this also. Actually we don't need to override this on create because we're doing nothing for now. So let's remove this. Actually let's delete the everything inside the class. Cool. So basically we just have an empty class declaration here, and similarly in the word list fragment we will delete everything above the class and everything inside the class. So only empty class declaration for now. Okay, but just a second. Yeah, so now as you can see we have two more layouts created, which is like fragment letter list.xml and fragment word list.xml. They both correspond to the letter list fragment and word list fragment respectively, right? Now we obviously don't need to create this from scratch again, so let's do one thing. What we can do is like copy the contents from the previous files to here. Okay, so if you remember, the list of letters was in activity main.xml because like this was the first XML, the first layout which appears. So what we will do is open activity main. This is all random stuff. Copy this much, go to letter list and paste it here and remove all this stuff. Okay, so basically like we deleted everything which was here already and we copied everything which was in activity main. I just ignored these comments. You can copy this if you want and pasted it here inside the letter list. And a couple of things we will have to change, which is like if you see it is referencing main activity here, so we obviously don't want to reference main activity, rather we want to reference letter list fragment, which is like the corresponding class file for this. So letter list fragment, and let's see what all layout width, cool, height, cool, this we change. This all looks fine for now. We will see if some error occurs later. Now coming to word list, set code here also. Let's delete everything which is already here. Let's copy the contents of activity detail. Activity detail was the activity which contains the list of words starting with a particular letter. Okay, copy, and we will go to fragment word list and paste. Why didn't paste it? Yeah, cool. Now it's pasted, but again in like the previous letter list thing, we will have to change this. So instead of the detail activity, we will now write word list. Yeah, this is word list. Fragment. Cool. So now we have created the two layouts for the word list and for the letter list, right? The bundle sync in progress is already done. Let's try to like first run the app. There should be no problem as of now because we just created new files, didn't link it anywhere. Okay, so this is like the same app which will run like we did at the end of the last session. So there should not be any difference. Let's just wait. It's taking some time. Sure. Okay, let's do one thing. In the meanwhile, let's like start implementing one of those fragments. So first we will go with letter list because this is like the main or the first fragment which we will see. The word list will come later, right? So now let's go to letter list fragment.kt. Launching app. Okay, cool. The app is actually launched. Let me show you. Yeah, so this is the app. We just created new files. There should not be any issue. So word start with A, word starts with F. We have this tool button here for list view and grid view, and like everything is working as expected, right? So we just created new files because we didn't link it anywhere, we didn't remove any old code. We just copied the old code and pasted it in the new file. Okay, now it's time to finally implement the fragments. Okay, so first of all we will create a binding. So it will be private because obviously we don't need it. Private or now I mean this underscore thing is basically a convention which we use in like nearly all the languages to convey that this property should not be used directly, or like there should be a particular get method, or this is private or things like that. I mean not all programming languages provide this private thing, that's why. So we create a binding which type will be fragment letter list binding. Cool. But you will understand why we put this underscore here. So we created this, but we don't we don't know what to initialize this with initially. So we can only initialize it after we are inflating the view. Okay, so initially this will be null, right? This we cannot assign any value to it before inflating the whole layout. So that's why we will have to put like question mark here. So the binding property will either be this fragment list binding, or it will be null, and initially it will be in fact null. Okay, but this will create a slight problem because now whenever you will have to use binding, you will have to like either do something like this thing. So this forces that this will be never null, but using this a lot of times in the code is not a good practice, because it's essentially you are saying that ignore everything, all the warnings, all the errors, and I make sure that it will never be null. Okay, and you should use it as less as possible. So if you're not using it, the second option might be left for you is conditional calling or conditional property access or whatever you call this. So question mark dot. So if binding is null, do nothing. If it's something, we have some value in it, then do whatever we want to do at like access property, call function and all that stuff. But again we will again have to use question mark again and again, while we know that not in most of the time it won't be null. Okay, so we create a get method for it. What get will do is like first create. Okay, so we created a get method, we named it binding. So now whenever you access some binding without this underscore, it will essentially call this get method, and what it will return is simply binding with exclamation mark. So now it forces that the binding will not be null. So instead of doing it again and again in all over the code, we just created a get method, and this underscore conveys that you should not directly use the value of this variable. So you should not directly use the underscore binding thing. Whenever you want to use something, use binding, don't use underscore binding. Okay, I think you get it, right? Okay, so why cannot we use late init for binding? Yeah, that's a valid question, And if you see late init in, okay, where we declared it, let's see. Yeah, so whenever you use late init, we should make sure that it's declared inside the onCreate function. So as soon as the object is created, the variable is initialized. So here also when you see recycler view, it's like defined in onCreate, but we cannot let's go back in this fragment, but we cannot like initialize the value of binding in onCreate method also. So that's why we cannot use late init. Only when the variable is initialized inside the onCreate, then only you can use late init. So actually we have a couple of different lifecycle methods. I have not covered it, but you will see it in the course. So we have like onCreate, then onCreate view. So onCreate is the first one which is like getting called. Then we have onCreate view, and we have a lot of other stuff. In the main activity, you can see onCreate. Okay, we don't have a lot of lifecycle methods defined here. Anyway, I mean, you get the idea, right? We have more than one lifecycle method. First is onCreate, and one more is onCreate view. So onCreate gets called first, and onCreate view gets called later. Yeah. Okay, so here was we created this binding. We get method now. Okay. Now we will like create two. I mean, not create. We will override two functions. First is onCreate view. Let's don't do anything here. And another is onCreate. Okay, so these are the two functions which are already defined, but we will override them. So now in the onCreate, let's not do anything with this. So we create the onCreate of the parent, which is super, and other than that we do set has options menu true. Cool. Actually, let's do one thing. Let's open main activity here and let us fragment here. It will be a little better. Cool. And let's also create these variables like recycler view and is linear layer, because ultimately we will need this. So private late init was recycler view private or is linear layout equal to true. So we created these two. We are now overriding this onCreate function. We called super onCreate. Okay, we are doing this different thing, but I mean that's the difference between activities and fragments. So both have the lifecycle methods, but there is some difference in both of the lifecycle methods. Okay, yeah, sure. So get line. Yeah, so we created a underscore binding variable, and the underscore signifies that this variable should not be accessed directly. That means that nobody should read the value of this variable directly. So if you will see in the code, I mean we will write, I will never use dot binding dot something. You can use something like binding equal to something. Okay, so you can write to this variable, but you cannot read the value of this. I mean you can, but it's a convention to not do something like this. Okay, so it's a good practice to not do something like this. but you can write it's okay to write the value. So since we are saying the programmer that you should not directly access the value of this variable, we need a way to access this variable. So in classes there is a common practice to create a getter functions for private variables. Now for that we created a getter function, binding get. So this is like the syntax of this. The name is binding and it is a getter function, and what it will return is, it will simply return the value of underscore binding, but with this double exclamation mark to make sure that its value is not null. So instead of this thing, we will do this. So binding is a getter function basically. We call it a function, but you can use it directly like this. You don't need to call this. Okay, that's the difference between getter function and the normal functions we create. So for getter functions you can directly do like this. So this is wrong, this is correct, and this is also correct. And another thing, now you cannot do this. This is wrong. This is this will give error, because binding is a getter function, so you cannot assign it something. Okay, it's ultimately a function. So this will essentially give the syntax error. This you can do, but it's not suggested by the convention. It's you can do and also it's suggested by the convention, and this is also correct. So these are the 4 things. These 2 we will use and these 2 we won't use. I hope it's clear now. So getter function, we also have setter functions to set the value, but we will not be using that. You can read about it. It's not very complex, simple thing. Okay, cool. So we created the onCreate. We have onCreate view, and in the onCreate view we will now initialize that binding thing. So let's not return this. Delete. Now as I said, we will do underscore binding equal to. So when we are setting, use underscore binding only. So fragment letter list binding dot inflate. Yes, inflator container, and attached to parent is false, and then return binding dot root. Okay, so now we will I forgot. Yeah, so we set this to underscore binding, but when we are accessing some property, which in this case is root, we will use normal binding without the underscore thing. Okay, so on create view, I guess that should be fine. So that's what I was saying. We didn't initialize the binding thing inside the onCreate, rather we did this in onCreate view. So okay, so that's the difference. Now we will obviously need this set layout, set icon functions also. So let's copy this much from the main activity and let's paste it here below the onCreate view. Set layout. Okay, there's a little error in this. If you there is a red line indicating the error. So unlike activities, fragment does not have store the context inside this variable. So found letter list fragment required context. So in case of activities, you can access the context like this, but in case of fragments, to access the context, you write context. So it has an inbuilt variable context. set let's set layout is fine now. Set icon, yeah, change context here. So context and set layout is done, set icon is done. Now we essentially need to like call these things. Let's see where this is called. Okay, so in case of activity, we call the set layout in onCreate, but in case of fragments, we have another lifecycle method which is onViewCreated. So I mean, this is onCreateView. So when it start creating view, and then we have onViewCreated. So the view is created. Override fun on view created. View saved since, yeah. Now we don't need to call the onViewCreated of parent. Instead, what we will do is let's see. So this much thing, basically initializing the value of recycler view. So recycler view equal to binding dot recycler view, and after this we like call the set layout, which is set the layout of this recycler view, either grid or. Okay, let's see why this is also given. Okay, it requires context but found context question mark. Okay, no issue. So I mean the context variable which the class provides can be null. So instead we can use another thing, which is this dot require context. So as you can see, the type of context is context question mark, but the type of required context is always context. It cannot be null. Okay, cool. Now there is no error here. We call the set layout here, and we create, I mean, I don't know why we don't have on delete thing. Okay, now we override another function which is on destroy view. So I mean, we have playing a lot with views here. So on create view, on view created, and now on destroy view. So like activities, I mean the views are also created and destroyed, and even more frequently. So we need to call this. So we will call super.onDestroyView, and we will now set this binding chain to null again. Cool. And like this is also like one of the reasons we didn't we initialized this binding as this not late in it, because ultimately when we are destroying the view, we are setting the underscore binding to null again. So there is no guarantee that it will always be not null. That's why we can not use late anything. I hope it's clear. But we made a couple of things, because obviously we are not doing anything with set icon. Let's see. So we have, let's remove this one now. We have on create options menu and on options item selected. These two will also be same. Let's copy these two also. This much, yeah. Let's write it bottom only. You can place the functions anywhere you want. Like if you want to keep on destroy in the end, you can do stuff like that. Cool. So now on create options menu, as you can see, like this is giving an error. So there is a minor difference again. That's why like I have opened those in the activity and the fragment file simultaneously, so you can see that the now fragment on create options menu takes 2 arguments actually. So if you like start from the scratch writing override on create options menu, it will like show you that it takes 2 arguments, menu and inflator, which is of the type menu inflator. So I mean this thing is same as this thing. So first we will remove this question mark so it won't be null. Second, we will take 2 arguments, inflator. Let's remove this. So again inflate the menu layout, but now we will use inflator. You can rename it to menu inflator if you want, but I'm just using this because this is the default name which Andrew Studio suggested if you like overwrite from scratch, don't copy paste. And now set icon. So we don't need to use question mark because it's never null. So menu dot find item, set icon. Actually, I think I think we don't need to even return something. Let's see on create option. On create options menu, yeah, it does not return anything in this case, so we don't need to return true even. And also remove the return type. Yeah, so we like set the menu layout, set the icon on create options menu is also like done. Now let's see any changes in on options item selected. I mean at least it's not showing any error, so I think we should be good to go. Set toggle, yeah. Anything else? Let's remove. We did all this. We set binding, we set recycle view, we called set layout, we copied this, we copied this, we copied this also. Yeah, we copied like literally everything, because ultimately what we are doing is like shifting from activities to fragments, so it was mostly copy paste. But now that we have copied nearly everything, we don't need all these things inside the main activity. Okay, so let's remove the recycler view thing, let's remove the set layout, let's keep the binding thing. We don't need set layout, we don't need set icon, we don't need on create options menu, we also don't need on options item selected. So let's like remove, delete everything from here. Okay, oh my god. So we are left with only the on create function in the main activity, because ultimately we copied everything into the fragment and now we will shift the whole functionality to fragments only. So any doubts so far? Yeah, I mean it's quite confusing, it's true. So I mean the set layout, set icon thing is normal, and these two functions are also normal, but the main issue is in like the lifecycle methods. So we have like on create lifecycle method which just calls the parent on create, which is like the default thing, and we set has options menu true. And now as I like said you previously also, we don't do initialize the binding in on create, rather we initialize it on create view. So first on create will be called when the object is like created. Now it will like start creating the view, so it will call on create view. So this is like the sequence in which these methods will be called. So first onCreate, then onCreateView. So when it starts creating the view, then only we can inflate it, right? We cannot inflate before starting to create the views. So that's why we have we inflate and set this binding thing in onCreateView and on view created. So in this case, the view is like has started creating, but it's not finished creating. So we cannot do anything with the recycler view yet because it's not there, right? We are just inflating and the process is going on, but it's not yet completed. So when it's completed, when the view is created, then we like initialize everything related to the recycler view. Okay, this is like all the starting process. So when you are starting this first, second and third, like this is the sequence of the functions. Now when the fragments goes out of the focus, let's say you navigate to some other fragment, or as I showed you earlier, we can have more than fragments in a single screen and we can like hide one of them depending on the screen size and all that stuff. So in any case, if the fragment goes out of the focus, it will call onDestroy view. So now we obviously call the parent onDestroy and we set the binding to null because we don't have all these things at this stage because everything is destroyed, right? So we initialize binding again to null. Fragments is a little more complex than activities. What you can do is, obviously I will suggest to read on the course. There is one more thing for debugging purposes. Log dot d. Okay, so you in JavaScript you do console log, in C++ and all that stuff you do cout. This is the way for debugging. So what you can do is log.d and you pass two arguments here. Let's say on create create called. It's showing error. I should have imported it. Yeah, now it should be okay. So you can put these log statements in all the lifecycle methods to see how exactly these are called when they are called. So if you copy this in, okay, let's copy this only, and let's change the tag to lifecycle. Tag is just for the searching purpose because there are a lot of logs, so you need something to search. On create view called. Okay, you can, if you want, you can copy it in on view, create it on destroy view and all that stuff. But for now, let's focus on this only. So I have copied this. Let me run the app. I'm not very sure what will be the output because we changed a couple of things, but let's see. It's running. I don't know what happened. Let's try to run it again. Oh, okay. I forgot that I removed this stuff, so obviously nothing will be there. So currently this is how the app is looking. So obviously we don't want this, but this is because we deleted everything from the main activity, right? So instead what I want to show you is how you can see these log statements. So here if you see in the bottom, you have something called logcat. So between terminal and build you have logcat. Is it visible to everyone? Good. So yeah, I was saying that you have this logcat here. It will store all your logs. You click this. Obviously, as I said, there's a lot of messages. Now what you can do is like search. For searching we will do life cycle. And one more thing, because we chose log.d, so d is like for debug. We have, let me show you. So warning, error, verbose, info, assert, there are a lot of stuff you can play around with. So since we chose debugging, we will like write d/lifecycle. Why didn't call? Okay, because the fragment was not there. Okay, let's keep this log code here. I will like show you later when we will do everything and this fragment is actually working. Because we didn't use the fragment, it's not loaded, so it never called on create and all that stuff. Okay, so let's go back and so the whole letter list fragment is set up, I think. Now main activity is we remove everything from this, so this should be done. For the word list fragment, okay, letter list fragment, yeah, this is something which I won't do. This is like your task, you can say. So complete this word list fragment, migrate the whole detail activity thing in the word list fragment. For now, I will show you the navigation with one fragment, which is the letter list fragment, and one activity, which is the detail activity. But later you should be able to, like, as I shifted the main activity to letter list fragment, you should be able to shift the detail activity to word list fragment, and then you can do navigation between one fragment to another fragment. So as I said in the previous session also, we can mix and match fragments and activity and navigate from anywhere to anywhere. So in this session, I created one fragment, letter list fragment, and I will navigate from it to another activity. I hope that's fine. So make sure to complete this. That's how you will learn. You will face some problem. You can see the course also. It gives you some hints on how to complete this, but that's what you should be able to do. Now comes the main navigation thing, which is required. For that, we will need to install some plugins and some setup stuff basically. So for that, let's minimize this Java thing. Actually, let's minimize one creative script. So we have two build.creative files, module and project. So let's first open the project. Now inside this ext thing, make sure that you have this thing written. So it's already there in most of the cases, but if it's not there in your case, make sure to write this. So nav_version equal to 2.3.1. So this is like the navigation component we are learning. Okay, this is one thing. Now in the module level Gradle file, which is like builder Gradle named module verse, this verse.app might be different again because it depends on the name of the project. In here, let's see, dependency or dependencies. So in dependencies, I don't think we have these. So let me share this on Google Meet only, and again for the people who are watching on YouTube, you will find this on the resources website. Okay, so in here, inside the dependencies, anywhere put these two lines. Okay, I have just created an empty line to make sure you know this. So I have added these two lines. Again, this is for the navigation component setup. You don't have to worry much about this. Cool. Now, one more thing we will have to do is it's called Cfrx Plugin. So if you remember, we were transferring some argument from one activity to another, which was the letter which we selected, and we did something. Let me show you. In detail activity, I guess it was, and we initialize this letter variable equal to letter to make sure that the programmer knows what argument should be passed and all that stuff. But again, this is one way, and one thing is it does not specify which type of argument it expects, right? It tells you that it is expecting a letter argument, but again it does not say is it a string, is it a character, is it an integer, is it a float. It tells nothing. So now we will do is we will remove this thing, and we will use Cfrx plugin. So what it does, it makes sure that we are passing what arguments are exactly expected. So it makes sure that all the requirements argument are passed, one thing, and secondly the types of those arguments which we were not checking previously. Okay, so for that we will need to make sure that this thing is here. I mean, again, most of the cases it will be there, but if it's not, make sure that you put it. Cool. In app level Gradle file, we have plugins with, 3 plugins are already there. We will add another id Cfrx.navigation.Cfrx.Kotlin. Again, I've kept an empty line just to show you. You can delete it if you want. So the project says that this is a plugin which is available, and now we are seeing this app to use this plugin, which is the, as I said, Cfrx plugin or safe arguments or whatever. After doing all this, as it says that Gradle file is changed, so sync now, or obviously it will take some time, but we don't have to wait for it. Now we will look into another cool stuff, which is navigation graph, by which we will implement the whole navigation. We will not use intents now, we will rather use navigation graph. Let me show you. This is First of all, let's close everything. Cool. Now first let's see what activity main. Initially activity main was our main layout or main entry point of our app, but since we are using fragments now, it will no longer contain this recycler view thing. Okay, so we don't need it here, so now let's delete it. Rather we will create a fragment container view. So let's start typing. It should suggest index.fragment.app.fragment container view. Width match parent, height again match parent. Let's give it some ID also. So it's like nav host fragment. And now let's close this. So this is like the container of the fragments, and we will like swap the fragment depending on the current navigation screen or state or whatever. Okay, and now we ID, and now let's give one more thing which is called name. Okay, it's not suggesting, no issue. So Android X dot navigation dot fragment. Okay, now let's remove this. Now we will add this later. Sorry for that. Let's do diff. Oh, okay. I got the issue. We have tools, Android. What is the issue? Just a second. Yeah, so we have this Android thing, we have this tools thing, but we need to add app thing also, because the default nav was in the app namespace. So we do app. Obviously we will have to change this also, schema.android.com/apk-auto. Now I think it should suggest. Still not suggesting. Okay, weird thing. Let's just write it. I don't know why it's not suggesting. Okay, anyway, so as the name suggests, it is saying that this is the default nav host. So we can have more than one host. So setting this as default tells the system to map the back button to the actual back of the navigation and things like that. Okay, so if you don't put this thing, the system back button will not go in sync with the actual navigation we are performing. Okay, so we put this default. Now we have to actually create a navigation graph, which is nothing but again a resource. So let's create a resource, and in this Android resource file, okay, file name is, let's say, simple navgraph .xml. Resource type is navigation. Root element, source directory name. Cool. Navgraph is created. Now let's go back and why it is not suggesting all this stuff. Anyway, so this is like the fragment container which will swap the fragment, but it need to know which navigation it is following. So in this layout file, in this navigation graph file, we will create a graph that from this screen on this action go to this screen with this argument and all that stuff. Now this fragment container should know that it is following this navigation graph, right? So what we will do is app nav graph. I don't know why it's not suggesting this for now, but it should suggest. If it's not suggesting, maybe you can like try restarting the IDE build and all that stuff. But I mean, this is right. I know this is correct. So we set this navigation graph to navigation resource, which is navgraph. So this is the same as this resource name, navgraph. Cool. This much is done, right? I mean, there obviously won't be any problem because we haven't tried running the app yet. Okay, so I assume there is no problem. In the navigation graph, again there are three codes: plate, design. In major cases, you will like play around with design only, so let's keep design. You have this little icon here, like a screen and plus new destination. So you select a new destination. Now we have a couple of things. So fragment letter list and fragment word list. So we have these two screens here, and if you see, we have a little like home icon in letter list fragment, but we don't have it in the word list fragment. So as you might guess, this home is for home screen type thing. So this will be the first screen, because we haven't told this container that you should start with this screen and all that stuff. We tell this also in navigation graph only. If you want to change it, you can change it by this. You can like set word list fragment as the home screen, but obviously you need exactly one home screen to start with, right? So we have created two screens here, letter list and word list fragment. Now we need to give it a navigation, like a navigation action that the user should be able to navigate from letter list fragment to word list fragment. So again, it's very simple. We have a little dot here. You click it, it starts a line, and like you can see it, right? You can drag it anywhere. I mean, anywhere in any activity or any fragment. So you select it. Yeah. Now this is created, and if you make it a little big, it gets an ID, action, this to this, destination, this, etc, etc. You can like play around with animation and all that stuff. Now comes that Cfrx plugin thing. By and large, I mean, okay, let me enlarge. You don't need to see exact screens in here. I mean, you just need to see the name. If you want to do anything with the exact screens, do it in their layout files. Cool. Yeah, so now comes this Cfrx plugin which I was talking about earlier. Now when we navigate from this screen to this screen, we need to make sure that there is an argument of name letter of type string which must be supplied. So we select this word list fragment here, and in arguments, this arguments drop down, we click plus. Name, you can put letter because we use letter. Obviously you can do anything. Type is string. It won't be an array, it won't be nullable. We don't need default value because we always want to supply it. There won't be any case where we don't supply any letter. Okay, so we add this argument. Cool. So we created this navigation action. We also specified the argument. We have this letter list fragment as the home screen or the start screen or the default screen. We created this design using this design thing, but it's worth taking a look at the code thing also. If you want, you can change in the code also, because if it's a small thing like changing the type of the argument, you can do it. You should be able to at least read what is here. So we have one fragment, letter list fragment, and we have another fragment, word list fragment, and the word list fragment takes argument whose name is letter and type is string. I don't expect you to write this on your own, but you should be able to read the code and make sense out of it, so that if there is some error or you want to change some minor thing, you can do that using the code. Okay, cool. Now when we use navigation graph and all this thing, we don't need to use the intent stuff which we were using. So let's remove close the layout files, open where was it, letter adapter, I guess. Yeah, so we were doing this we were creating intents for navigation which was using the activities. Now we are using the fragments and navigation graph and all that stuff. We are shifting from just learning the navigation to using the best practices which are followed in navigation, which are using fragments and this navigation component and Cfrx plugin. Okay, so obviously let's write the comment. We using navigation graph and Cfrx plugin. In this also you will have to set an on-click listener, so ultimately you navigate after on-click. Okay, now just like intent is just a request and not exactly you are saying to fulfill a request. You create a request here, but it's not started till you call this statement, right? So just like that, we have another thing for for navigating using fragments and navigation graph. So in that case, you don't have an intent, but you have a similar thing called action. Again, this is just an action, but you have not started that action yet. We will obviously start that, but we have not done it yet. So what is the action? So action is basically, we are currently in the letter list fragment. So letter list fragment directions. So directions is like edges of the graph. So this is the navigation graph, and this is like one of the edge. Okay, so direction, where was it? Direction is an object containing all the edges of the graph. So you put a dot there, and now you can access all the edges. So what edge we want? Action, letter list fragment to word list fragment. And now, as you can see, it's already saying to supply a letter which is of the type string, and this is due to the Cfrx plugin. So let's see how we, so the letter is holder dot button dot text dot toString. You can use toString, you can use AString. Ultimately, you know that it will be string, so it won't be an issue as such. Now, this action is created, but we have not started this action yet. So what we will do is holder.view.find nav controller. So there is a controller which will do all this stuff. We call navigate on that controller and we supply action. There is no error. Cool. So we created an action. It's just a request which was the same with intent. The intent is just a request to do something, but it does not do anything on its own. So similarly, action is just a request for an action, but we are performing this action on this line. Okay. Let's see what. Letter adapter. Okay, we use this find nav controller here, but we need to initialize this also, and we will do it in main activity. This was the empty thing. So let's do private. Again, this will be late in it because it's not defined at this moment only, but we will define it on create. Nav controller, its type will be nav. Why it's not suggesting? Cool. So we declared a nav controller. Now we have to set it, and we will do it in the on create, which as I just said. So nav controller equal to something. Now what will be this something? Let's first create this. So we want that nav host fragment. We clear it in. So this was a nav host fragment. So we want to reference this container here, because nav controller will take all the relevant arguments. Like as the name says, it's like controller, so it needs to take the container of the fragment. It also needs to take the navigation graph, so it needs everything to act as a controller, right? So nav host fragment equal to, now for finding the fragments we have this thing, support fragment manager, and then find fragment by id. Now id is a resource id nav host fragment. Cool. Let's now try to directly send it to the nav controller. So nav host fragment dot nav controller. So as you can see, there is no suggestion, and also it will give error. So what we have to do is tell its type. So what is the type of the fragment which it will find? So as nav host fragment. Cool. So now we told that it will be of the type nav host fragment, and now it's perfectly fine setting the nav controller as a nav controller of this fragment. Is that fine till now? We did a lot of stuff. For the people who are, who joined now or a few minutes earlier, the recording will be available to like watch from the starting. Honestly, it will be very difficult to like jump in from now. Okay, so anyway, let's try to run the app and see what we have done. I mean, this was a lot of stuff. Oh. The app crashed for some reason. Something bad happened. Let's see. The app is actually crashing. At least it should open. So in the main activity, we put nav controller. Now it's fragment nav controller. This looks fine. In the XML file, okay, I forgot to add one thing, but I'm not sure will it like cause the crash or not. So let's do Android name. Yeah, it was not suggesting, so I just skipped it. Fragment dot nav host fragment. Let's try to run now. Oh wow, this was the problem. Cool, so we have this. We press on A. Again something happened. This I know what is the issue. As I said, I won't be like setting up the whole word list fragment. This is empty. For now, I will show you the navigation using one fragment and one activity. So we don't need word list fragment here. Rather, we need a activity detail. And from navigation, we put this, and this will take an argument, name, letter, type, string. I mean, make sure that you tried doing it first with activity, but ultimately you should be able to complete that word list fragment and do the navigation using two fragments only, right? This should create issues somewhere at least. Yeah, so now the name is not action letter test. Action letter is fragment to detail activity. Yeah, let's try running the app now. So we have this app We press on A, words that start with A. We press on C, words that start with C. Words that start with H. Cool, everything seems to be working now. Just one thing, if you notice, when I press A, this the title of the app bar. The app bar is this thing on the top. Words that start with A. But on the main screen also, in the letters, we have the title is words. Obviously, we don't need this words title. We need something like list of letters, letter list, something like that. I mean, we obviously don't need words. So the issue is, by default, it does not set the correct app bar title. Rather, we explicitly need to tell it to set like correct title, and we do it in this main activity when we do this all setup stuff. So when we are setting up the nav controller and things like that, we will also need to do this. Okay, so let's start writing. I mean, at least you got the issue right. What is the issue? Can someone like at least message if anyone is with me so far and you understand what exactly is the issue? Anyone? Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you for messaging. So yeah, so the issue is essentially that we need a proper title. So what we will do is, it's a simple function call which we will do while setting up the navigation controller, and it's simply, so that thing here, let me show. So this thing is known as action bar. Okay, the actual name is action bar, so we will call setup action bar with nav controller. Cool, auto slash. And I mean, if you don't know what it takes a nav controller, so we will pass a nav controller. Now let's try running the app again. Okay, so now the title is little better. So let's start with A, and in this case, fragment letter list. But you might want to change the title because it is not very good word. I mean, I don't get the word, but you need something more familiar to the user, right? So letter list or something like that. So you again go to the navigation graph. Here in the letter list, you see we have a label. So you can change this label to anything you want. So let's write letter list. It does not depend on anything, so it can be literally anything you want. Now let's try running. Letter list. Now let's try running the app again. Letter list. Cool. So we have used the navigation graph, we have used the Safe Arguments plugin, we have done navigation using one fragment and one activity. Now the task you should complete is like set up the word list fragment and remove this detail activity from here. One more thing which you will have to do is, where is it? Yeah, so this letter ID, in this case, in case of the activities, we are getting the letter ID like this from the intent, but ultimately this is not good because we are no longer using the intent. It's working, but it's not good. So when you are done with this fragment thing, so you are navigating between two fragments, try to figure out a better way to do this. Try to search on the intent first, and if you are not able to get the right thing, maybe you can look at that course also. so they are also suggesting you to use the butter thing. But I will suggest to like first try to Google and all that stuff. So just to like give you a small hint, maybe use what should I say? So you will have to use something like arguments dot let. So if you remember, when we like created a new fragment before doing all that cleanup and deleting all the code, there was something like this written, and you will have to use something like this. So try to Google, and if you see something matching like this, use that. But make sure you have done the fragment thing first. Okay, cool. So I guess that was all. One more thing for the now this is like the 5th session, and whatever we have covered so far will make sure that you can easily earn 9 badges at least on the course. For the requirement of the certificate of completion by GDSC IIIT Hyderabad, you will have to earn at least 10 badges. Okay, so this is like a little push you will have to do yourselves to earn that one extra badge. The stuff we have covered will make like you can earn easily 9 badges from that. Read a little bit more and you can get the last badge also. And now let's come to the deadlines. What are the deadlines? For the people who are not aiming for the certificate of excellence, that means that they are not willing to build the app, their deadline is 15 January 2022. I will like update all this obviously on the Discord server and the website also. So if you missed it, then don't worry. So no excellence certificate. So for those people, you have this deadline. And for the people who want an excellence certificate, your deadline is as far as I remember, it was like 2nd January for 80 to 90% completion. So you should be able to show at least 80-90% of the app you have built. And other than that, 5th January for 100% completion. Full app, all the features working. Now, it may look nonsense to you because for getting the excellence certificate, you have to do a little bit extra, but still the deadline is like much earlier than the no excellence certificate deadline. But the thing is, this certificate is just given by GDSC IIIT Hyderabad, so I was able to extend the deadline. But for the excellence certificate, the app you will submit will actually get submitted to the Google, and they will like pick the best apps out of the submission done by all the GDSCs and may feature them on their website and all that stuff. Okay, so I mean they will pick a couple of apps and they will like showcase them. So they have a very strict deadline. That's why I can't do much in this. For the people who are not aiming to build an app, you can like take time and do it like till 15 January. There is no hurry. 15 January, like a lot of days. One more thing, for the app, you can form teams. There is no restriction that you need to do it individually. And as I said, there will be a couple of requirements. Let me show the doc with you. Again, this doc will be available on the website and all that, so don't worry. Yeah, so for the app submission, the major submission, which contains 80-90% work, is to be done by January 2. For the final submission, everything including some reports which we will discuss later, should be done by January 5, 2022. The app scope is like pretty big. I mean, you can nearly pick anything you want, but make sure it lies in one of these 3 areas. So it's either a college or university app, community app, or help to some individual or private organization. Just go through this. This is a minimum app requirements. So use Kotlin. Obviously, you will have to use Kotlin, and implement at least 3 Kotlin concepts, which was taught in this course, in these sessions or the actual course. This should be very simple to do. Secondly, at least 3 screens using the navigation library. This should also be fairly simple to do, given that we have already covered navigation to a large extent, and you will have to go maybe a little bit more to implement the 3 screens with proper functionality and all that stuff. But then there is thing, live data, view model, room database. These 3 things should be used at least once throughout your app. And we have not covered these in these sessions, but they are covered in the course, and you will have to go through that on your own. And obviously that's why it's excellence certificate, not just completion, because you are going more than what's expected. So you can either do all the code labs or just read whatever you want. You don't need to earn badges for all this. You just have to use them in your app at least once. So live data should be used at least once. This view model should be used at least once, and room database should also be used at least once. And at least once does not mean that just use it. It should fix in your idea or the functionality of your app. It should make sense that you are using this thing. Now, you have built the app. You should submit a one-pager intro, maybe a PDF document or a markdown file, which tells which problem, the problem statement. You can choose any of these, and also specify the exact problem what your app is solving, what solution you provide with a couple of screenshots with the app functionality and concept use. Make sure to write where all you used all these things and how you use them, and make sure there are proper commits at different checkpoints. So you have done maybe a basic version of the app, you commit one thing, you implement another feature, you commit again, you complete a full app, you commit. So you should commit at different checkpoints. It's better for you also, so that if some bug come up, you at least know that everything was working till this commit. Okay, this is one thing also, just upload it on GitHub repo and share the future scope, just a few lines of what you can do more if you were given more time. To be honest, the deadline is 2 January for 80-90%, but it's not very difficult to do this. The words may seem a lot, like live data, room database, big words, but once you go through the topics, it's not very difficult to do. And again, in case of any doubts or queries, feel free to contact me through any communication medium you prefer. I have linked the LinkedIn and Twitter profile. You can communicate you can also message on the Discord server and all that stuff. So that was all for today's session. Thank you for attending, and for the where to submit the app. First thing is, you don't need to exactly submit the app, rather you will only need to submit this one-pager intro, which is the PDF file. And for that, I will share my email ID. Don't publicly share it. Maybe you can keep the repo private also. We will see exactly how you can submit so that it is private also, but I can at least read it. Don't worry about the submission, at least for now. I will share it, but make sure that you, whatever you have an idea, so you have an idea that I want to build this thing, make sure it covers these requirements. Submission, submission is just, you don't need to do a lot of things if I change the submission format, right? If I say you that don't upload on GitHub, send me a zip file, you don't have to do a lot of stuff. So don't worry about that. Just make sure that whatever app you choose to build satisfies these requirements, and you can form teams, as I said. If you are not comfortable working individually, you can form teams, no issue in that. And as I said, the deadline is before the deadline for the completion of certificate of completion, because these apps will be submitted to Google and they will choose some best app to showcase on their website and all that stuff. That's why the deadline is early. And one more thing, I've seen that people from other colleges are also attending these sessions and are associated with GDSC IIIT Hyderabad. So in the registration form, I will like add a field college name, and I request you to like fill that also. It won't be compulsory. It's just I will like get an idea of how many people from which college are attending all this. And for the profile thing, you don't need to show all your badges if you are building the app. But if you're not building the app and you are only aiming for the certificate of completion, you will need 10 badges as it was already written. And for showing that badges, you need a developer profile which is public. Now the link to the developer profile is, it is of two forms, either developers.google.com/profile/you/some number, let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6, some number. It's a big number, I don't know how many digits. It's either this or something like this. So this is name, nickname, whatever. So some people have not added their profile link in this way, and some people even skipped adding a proper profile link. So for them, I would request to like add a proper link. And also in some cases, I tried to opening the link, but it was not opening. So make sure that the link is opening, the badges are visible. If you have not earned any badges till now, at least it should show that you don't have any badges. The profile should be visible. That's what I want to say. So make sure all this stuff is done. The form is not editable now, but I will like make it editable maybe within an hour. And there will also be a option whether you will be building the app or not, because since the deadline for the app is before the deadline for the certificate of completion, I need to know how many people are building the app to like give a rough idea of the number of apps which will be submitted by the GDSC IIIT Hyderabad. Okay, so make sure to mark that you will be building the app in the form only. Any doubts? Okay, cool. So for the form I am saying about the registration form, for any certificate you need to fill the form, and also join the Discord server for any updates, any changes in rule and all that stuff. And you can find the link to everything on this website which I have just sent. Is it fine? The website contains everything, the Discord server, the form link, everything. Okay, if you still have any doubts which you don't remember now, you can ask them later through, maybe message me on LinkedIn, Twitter, anything, or just ask on the Discord server. Okay, cool. So thank you everyone. Thanks for attending, and bye bye.